have been using this standard Amazon spray booth for over a year. In this review video, I will share the pros and cons to help you decide if it's right for you. NewType is a fast and reliable source of Gunpla supplies in the US. For my fellow Canadians, our Gamma Hobby offers the largest stock of kits, tools, and paints. Let's start with the pros. The biggest one is that this booth is easily available and relatively affordable. If you don't have the time or energy to DIY a booth, this standard model is widely sold on Amazon. The brand doesn't really matter, they're all about the same build and quality, likely rebrands from the same manufacturer. However, there are two small features on mine which I recommend everyone get, and I'll mention later. You can absolutely buy a fan and build your own booth, even out of cardboard, but I personally wanted something ready to use right away. I bought mine for 192 Canadian before tax, now around 220 Canadian or 155 USD, which felt like a reasonable entry price for something I plan to use for at least a few years. The second main pro, and the reason I bought it, is that it's lightweight and portable. If you have very limited space and can't dedicate a whole desk to painting, you can easily remove it when you're done. I wouldn't recommend fully disassembling it every time since there are quite a few loose parts and it doesn't get that much smaller, but it's light enough even for me to carry to another room for storage. I keep mine in our spare bathroom, which I use as storage because our landlord didn't give us the storage locker for our condo. While most Amazon booths look about the same, I had two must-have features. One was the upper exhaust design for space efficiency. Avoid the back exhaust designs which take up extra desk space. The second must-have feature is adjustable dials. I read a lot of reviews before buying and noticed many people complaining that their booths only had on and off switches, and they ended up installing their own dials. I found this a bit strange because some brands already include them, like mine. It has two dials, one for the light and one for the fan. I usually keep the light at max, but I do turn down the fan when I'm taking a break and letting parts dry inside the booth. A nice perk of buying such a common model is that replacement filters in the right size are easy to find. The brand doesn't matter, just look for the cheapest bulk option. Some people use fish tank filters or even wash and reuse to save money, but I've been a bit lazy and just purchased replacements. I read a lot of reviews saying parts of the booth broke down after a few months. Lights, fans, or switches. But after a year of regular use, mine's still going strong. I've even banged it quite hard against doors while moving it, but it still functions like when I first received it. So I would say to remember that it's usually only people who have had problems who post bad reviews. Before we move on to the cons, you'll have noticed that I mainly airbrush Gunpla with lacquer paints, so I will have more concerns about space and the smell than someone painting minis with acrylic paints. The biggest con, which can outweigh all the pros, is its size. It's small. Now, I could be biased. I used to paint in a large DIY booth in a big studio in Korea. If you'd like to see the full video on that booth, I'll link it in the description box below. Since I have downsized in Canada, the negatives might stand out more to me. Even though this is the biggest size available for the Amazon booths, it is still really small in comparison. Here are all the negatives about having a small booth. You can't fit your airbrush holder inside, so you're constantly moving your hands in and out, which is really inconvenient and risks hitting the booth and spilling paint. In a large booth, I could attach my holder inside, gives much easier access. You might suggest pushing the booth back or the holder forward, but This in a straight line with a bit of gap is the most natural position for me. I used to keep everything inside my booth. Junk thinner, paints, wipes, tools, even parts. But now I can only fit my junk thinner and a few bottles of paints before blocking the filter. Everything has to be outside. Constantly reaching in and out slows down my workflow and increases the chance of knocking something over. Because of this, I try to keep my junk bottle in the left-hand corner and my paints in the right-hand corner. Nothing that can spill should be near the edge of the booth. With a huge booth, I was able to paint and dry my parts within the booth as I painted. This allowed for a very important step for the parts to dry inside of the booth and therefore minimize the smell. I know a very common question I will get is regarding the suction power of the fan, and I will get into that, but let me tell you, the strongest fan inside a booth will do nothing for the smell in your room if your lacquer painted parts are drying outside of it. Your room will smell like the inside of a paint bottle. What do I do about this? I paint 100% with a respirator on. My room does smell really bad while I paint because my windows provide poor ventilation and I often paint with my doors closed. After a session, I dry my parts in my balcony and air out my room. I noticed that I got a lot more dust on my parts painting in a small booth. Even though I wipe it down, dust in a small booth recirculates a lot more easily. Our bigger booth also had 2 vents, while the Amazon booth only has 1. Dust and residue also collects quickly in the filter, which also falls out really easily if you touch it, and that happens a lot in a tiny area. Overall, this just means more cleanup of both the booth and my parts. A small booth also results in overspray, especially when you are painting larger parts with a higher PSI. Sometimes I can literally see the paint coming back into my face. This sums up all the cons resulting from the size of the booth. Let's move on to the next con, which is the weak fan. For $200 and a small portable booth, I wasn't expecting much. If you do the typical tissue test, yes, it does get pulled to the filter. However, there have been times when I forgot to put my exhaust pipe through my window. Yes, it's stupid, but I probably set the booth up, walked away, and came back to start painting. Embarrassingly, I've forgotten quite a few times, and honestly, the smell was the same. It probably helps to trap paint particles, but don't expect it to remove the fumes in your room. Again, most of the smell comes from the parts drying outside of the booth anyways. I don't have a fancy decibel meter, but this is about how the fan sounds. This is the highest. It starts up really fast. I can feel the wind really coming out from here. I haven't put the tube in yet. And I'm lowering it. And this is lowest setting. It is a lot louder than my old booth, and reviews often do complain about the noise. You won't be able to hear someone talking to you outside or knocking at your front door. Personally, it is a bit loud, but I usually paint with AirPods or noise-canceling headphones anyways. This large gap in the booth allows it to be folded up, but I've also spilled sanding dust or paint through here. It's not a huge deal, but if you don't plan to fold it often, cover the bottom. And that concludes my review. Now, you probably want me to tell you whether to buy this booth or not, but that really depends on your situation. These are the people who should buy this booth. You are lazy, have a bit of cash, and don't want to DIY. This is an easy buy and setup. You paint with acrylics. You don't have to worry about the smell of drying parts outside of the booth. You paint in a very small space or need the portability. This is my exact situation and the singular reason I use it. I've turned down sponsorships for free waterfall booths, and I haven't tried to DIY my old booth because neither of these options are very portable. On the other hand, do not buy this booth if you are on a very low budget or are not sure if you really want to commit fully to a new hobby. DIY the cardboard or Tupperware booth first. You have a lot of cash to throw around. Why are you watching this video with us poor commoners? I would buy the biggest and most expensive booth I can find off the market and call it done. You have a lot of time, are very handy, and can afford the space. Personally, the minute we move into a bigger space, I will start looking into remaking our old, bigger DIY booth so I can work and let parts dry inside of the booth and minimize the dust that gets onto my parts. I still find most market booths have this slant top and aren't really big enough for parts to fit inside. I might also consider a waterfall booth just to try out, or maybe as a secondary option. Now, having given you my very honest review, if you do plan on purchasing this booth and would like to purchase my exact booth or any of the products and accessories I use to paint in this video, you can find them on my US and Canadian Amazon storefronts. Purchases send a small commission my way at no extra cost to you, which helps me to continue creating content like this. Another way to support this channel is through my Patreon. Patrons receive special perks like real-time extended versions of my work in progress videos and access to my private Discord server where you can chat with me and fellow Gunpla hobbyists. See you in the next video.